what is the difference between what was promised by those who were encouraging people to vote for Brexit, encouraging farmers specifically, and the reality of what you've seen as the founder of Save British Farming in the last 8 years?
You've said have been visible advantages that we've already seen from Brexit so far.
One thing I noticed in Sainsbury's the other week, a product which had a New Zealand flag on, which I think is evidence that we have better trading arrangements with. We're starting to source food from where we used to before we joined the European Economic Community, I think it was called in the beginning.
Is that the only advantage that you've noticed so far?
It's the one which first comes to mind. I'm sure I could find more if I look.
Let's speak to Liz Webster, a farmer in North Wiltshire and founder of Save British Farming. Liz, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Laura said we need to be doing things faster. Do you see any evidence of that?
No,
Right.
no, not at the moment, no,
Right.
sadly.
Okay.
I think farmers feel very isolated and abandoned in these, particularly these
You're
last
so important
few
to
months.
us. We eat the stuff you grow. Why can't you be taken more seriously? Why not?
I wish we were. Some people do, but a lot of people think their food comes from a supermarket shelf, unfortunately, and they don't quite sort of, realise that 2 + 2 = 4. And if we're not able to grow food, there's not going to be enough food to go around. So this winter has been enormously challenging, particularly for those of us on low-lying land. And we've been flooded on our farm since October. So we haven't been able to harvest.
Right, okay, there you go.
We haven't been able to harvest our maize. Much of it's still out there.
And where would that maize go? Where would that maize go? Where would that end up?
Much of it goes into cattle feed, and some of it also goes into an AD plant.
Right, okay. So if you lost that, where would you get the maize from? Where would you get the cattle feed from?
Well, luckily we've got some good stocks here, but
Right.
we also provide other farms. So it is going to be a challenge. Going through this next year to 18 months is going to be a huge challenge because people haven't been able to drill their autumn crops, and they also are struggling to get their spring crops in. So we're going to have huge straw shortages and feed shortages, and it's very worrying. Yeah, particularly for animals, because. They need in the winter. We need to be able to, make sure they've got their beds and their food in the winter. And now, also, it's delayed putting the animals out in the fields because it's too wet to put them out there. So it means we're using more bedding than we normally would because they're still being housed in the sheds. So it's compounding itself.
So, Liz, if you weren't wasting time talking to me and actually spoke to someone with some power at DEFRA, for instance, Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, what would you say should be top of your inbox at DEFRA to help us farmers and by doing so, of course, protect the food security of this country going forward?
Well, God, I'll be here all day if I start doing that.
I bet you would. But tell me some priorities.
The flood management, as your previous caller just said, we've got big urban developments, and this is what we struggle with because we're fairly near to Swindon, and there's new housing developments, and all of it washes off onto our fields, which goes into the Thames. And there's just very poor infrastructure planning that's happened over the years, and everything just pours into onto one particular area. And then the Thames is held back to save Oxford and London. And so we don't dredge the rivers any longer, which means that the water table is never really reducing. So you might have some periods without rain, but the river itself stays high because it's not washing out to sea. So it's just a hopeless situation, really. But it doesn't seem to be much... There's no joined up thinking, I would say, from DEFRA all the way through. And since Brexit in particular, because moving from the CAP into ALMS...
That's the Common Agricultural Policy, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And then into this new system, which is, been so chaotic, that it really means that I think we feel very isolated and, as I said, and abandoned, and we just don't, we don't feel that we've had much help. The government recently has said they're going to give compensation for some of the flooding, but I don't know if you've seen, to actually get this compensation, there's a very tight criteria, and many of us probably won't be able to get it or access any of it anyway. And ultimately, they're offering us schemes, environmental schemes, and many more farmers are deciding to go into environmental schemes, which takes us away from food production, which is leaving us to rely on imported food, which is fine as long as the global food stocks, I guess, are there and we can always get that food. But it does mean that domestic food production in Britain is collapsing on a very frightening scale from the changes from Brexit and from the flooding and the environmental issues that we're all having to face, and because of government policy. So it is a real shambles, and we really need someone to come in and really have joined up thinking about understanding the importance of food security and the fact that we can look after the environment and produce food together. It's not one or the other. We can do both, and we want to do both. But the way that things are standing, it's just not working.
Okay, definitely not going to dredge up the whole Brexit argument again. But one thing I do want to ask you, because you're an actual farmer, is what is the difference between what was promised by those who were encouraging people to vote for Brexit, encouraging farmers specifically, and the reality of what you've seen as the founder of Save British Farming in the last 8 years?
Well, there were loads of promises, and none of them ever made any sense, because you had people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage promising cheaper food, which, of course, farmers knew that we already had some of the cheapest food in certainly in the developed world when we were in the European Union.
Plus, we couldn't have foresaw the war in Ukraine, of course, which added quite a lot to that. So that's not a Brexit reason, is it?
That's not a Brexit reason, but what it's meant is that because of Brexit, we've not been able to cope as well with that as perhaps other countries have. But they also promised, Boris Johnson went to a livestock market and promised the earth to farmers, that we'd get more funding and we'd be able to tailor everything to the way we want it. And that's why some people fell for it. But we've ended up with less support, less everything, and it's a frightening situation. And some people turn around and say, "Oh, those farmers, they voted for it; they can reap what they sow." But ultimately, as you pointed out at the beginning, we do need food security because with the way the world is going with geopolitics, it's a very scary place to think that you're relying on food coming in from the other side of the world. And if suddenly they have a climate disaster like we've had this last 6 months, and they're short of food, then they're not going to be sending food over here, are they? And that's the whole reason for having a decent food system in your country, to make sure that you can feed your people.
Yeah, to your point about people saying, well, you guys voted for it as farmers. Almost on cue, someone texted in, maybe they should not have plastered vote leave all over their field. They caused this. That's from Christian in Beccles. So there you go. I'm sure you're not immune to hearing that opinion voiced.
No, these farms often have advertising sites, and Vote Leave were very good at getting their posters out. It doesn't mean to say that farmers all put those posters on their land.
It's a redundant argument anyway. We are where we are, and we've got to work out how to get...
Well, it is, because we need food.
Yeah,
and we do
exactly.
look after the environment and the countryside as well. And all of these things matter. So we do need to have a healthier approach to dealing with where we are. And it does need all of us to pull together to make sure that we sort something out and put pressure on, well, particularly as we're going through an election. Soon we'll be going through an election. The new government, I hope, will have a more sensible approach to sorting this mess out.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see. I think my assistant editor just suggested we should do a farming outside broadcast. We should spend 3 hours on a farm, Liz. I think we should take the show to a farm to really get it.
You're more than welcome to come down to us for 3 hours. We would love that. I think it is really important for people to get more of an understanding of what goes on farms. And I'm sure there's lots of other farmers out there we can find that would be up for getting involved and trying to get this message across to the public, which is why we set up Save British Farming. We're trying to educate people and put pressure on power to sort of say something needs to be done. And thanks very much for giving us some airtime.
Well, we'll hopefully be giving you 3 hours at a time. My people will speak to your people, Liz Webster, and we shall try and sort something out. And I may see you in North Wiltshire before the year is out.
Sounds good.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz Webster there, farmer in North Wiltshire and founder of Save British Farming. Right.
Able to sell their stock, and for some of them that is a very profound danger for them being able to run their businesses and pay their staff and pay their wages.
You've got to do, what you can't do is government can't magic up changes to their systems overnight. People need to recognise that we cannot simply continue with models which have basically held this country back and held our economy back. So that's why...
David, in just a second, he was one of the organisers of the rally yesterday. First of all, Simon, a new caller from, my part of the world, Alton in Hampshire. You were at the protest yesterday. Why? Good morning.
I was at the protest yesterday to support British farming. I'm an arable farmer from Hampshire, and I'm fed up with the government letting us down and selling us out with trade deals like the Australian and New Zealand ones that allow inferior product to come in from the other side of the world that doesn't have to match our safety standards or animal welfare standards and can undercut the high standards, which is a good thing. I think farmers having high standards here, good for food safety, sustainability, etc.
So what are you asking the government to do exactly?
For a level playing field. Subsidies are going. Subsidies were brought in to produce food cheaper and to help with the higher costs and guarantee food after the world wars. Those are going. And, so we're coming to a subsidy-free climate, and farmers cannot survive with supermarkets paying such low prices and the government actively encouraging food to come in from other countries that can undercut us.
Were you in your tractor?
Our standards.
Were you in your tractor or not?
I was in a truck following the tractors yesterday.
An amazing sight it was. David,
it was an amazing sight, and really heartwarming and great to.
You've got a lot of support. I think you've got a lot of support, I think. David is in Maidstone. You were one of the organisers of the rally yesterday. Is the situation for British farming as serious as it's ever been?
It's dire. It's dire. I heard a report last week that 60 to 80% of smaller to medium-sized family farms are losing money currently. And that's before these trade deals. Well, they're not trade deals. They're giveaways for the foreign governments to send stuff here. And we're as an industry, these substandard products that are coming in, we've got regulations and conditions that we have to fix and set to. A lot of other countries aren't abiding by the same things. They can use chemicals that we're not allowed to use. They can use growth hormones that we're not allowed to use. This comes over here, then it's pre-packaged over here, and it's labelled up as British produce because it's packed here. So it's unfairly labelled, so people think they're buying British products and they're actually buying foreign products.
All right, well, let me ask you both. First of you, David, do you wish we were still in Europe or not?
I personally do, yeah. At least the Europeans look after that. I know they've got riots problems in Europe as well, but that's a different agenda. But the European CAP did protect food production. It gave the public cheap food and kept the farmers in producing stuff.
Have you got any more protests planned?
We're getting over this one first. It was a big day yesterday.
Yeah, it really was. Anyway, thank you very much. We all have a soft spot for farmers, I think, don't we? And Simon, do you wish you were still in Europe?
Yeah. Well, Europe had its faults, but at least we had a level playing field. I supported us staying in Europe, as did surprisingly a lot of farmers, although most people think we didn't.
No, I know. I've got loads of texts here saying, well, you've got what you wanted. And it's like, no, they didn't vote for Brexit.
Well, actually, it was, I read an article saying it was 45% of farmers voted Remain.
There you go.
53% Leave, and which was lower than some industries. That was from Farmers Weekly.
Yeah.
So not all farmers...
No, I know. I think that information has always been misleading. I wish we had more time, but thank you very much. And like I say, I think most most of the British public are behind the farmers. But when it comes to just, you've got to be helped, haven't you, in some way, I think. That's